All right, we will get started here in just a second. People are joining now. Give them another minute or two. What's going on, Mickey?
Not much, man. I miss you. By the way, I just showed you this. I got your Vector hat for you. I also have this. I haven't seen you since before the pandemic. And so anyway, I brought these two props. But as a reminder that the world will go back to normal at some point, and I'll give you those things.
All right, one day. It shouldn't be too much longer from now. But for those of you listening, Mickey and I used to work together. We've known each other for the better half of a decade at this point, right?
Yeah.
4 years. So
that's right.
Looking forward to this very public chat today. And without further ado, we'd love to kick it off. So Mickey and I worked previously together at a company called rented.com. When we were both there, we were doing master leasing of units. And I think both of us came to different conclusions, which led us down our different paths. So Mickey, give me some information on what led you to the path that you're on and where you are today.
Yeah, it was a wayward, winding path. So I worked in commercial real estate in my 20s, and then kind of through that experience, and I knew my co-founder from rented.com from college, and he reached out to me around that idea, and I really viewed it as basically a continuation and extension of that commercial real estate career, specifically around the hotel deals that I'd worked on in commercial mortgage banking. And I said, wait a second, you basically just got a unit, one house that is like its own hotel. Well, play that out a few years. We were a marketplace connecting assets with operators. Then we had a rented capital fund where we would go out and lease inventory and partner with operators, and kind of realized all of the challenges with that, but also some of the shortcomings, specifically that the real estate side of the equation on the winners kind of lost out. They got rents, but they didn't participate in the upside. And then there was just such a difficult business to scale. I mean, it was the data was sparse. It's still relatively sparse in a lot of areas and a lot of markets. And then, just kind of the underlying limitation, an arbitrage related business, over time theoretically shouldn't really pan out. And we've kind of seen that in reality. And in 2020, at least with certain companies or certain instances. So, but backing up to early 2018, when I left Rented and I wanted to do something new within short-term rentals, I kind of surveyed the marketplace, and I realized you had Saunders of the world doing the LeaseAware model at a really large scale within urban markets and multifamily, specifically apartments. And then you had kind of the Y hotel model, basically rezoning a property, running a portion of it, a large portion of it as a hotel. And then you had something kind of in the middle, Apartment Jet, which became part of Expedia Multifamily, taking kind of one-off, maybe handfuls of units and leveraging the on-site staff, but layering in some tech. And again, repositioning that multifamily asset as a short-term rental or a hospitality asset. We kind of just split right down the middle. We took something that was a tried and true model, in our opinion, revenue share, fee management, worked in long-term rental management, worked in vacation rentals, works in hotels. We just didn't see that specific niche being filled, and so we jumped on that in early March of 2018, and subsequently we've built it out, since then.
Awesome. And watching you guys during COVID, some of your competitors or folks that others might label as your competitors, like Stay Alfred, for example, or Lyric, have either heavily contracted or gone away. But you guys have seemed to go the opposite direction and grow. What did you see in the market? What made you decide to run the opposite direction?
Yeah. I mean, I guess for us, a lot of things go back to values and the people that come on board in our small team, kind of us versus the world, in a sense, is how we view it, at least until it's adopted by a client or adopted by more of the mainstream. And I think that's been playing out. But one of our values is basically if there's an action to take and it's consistent with the rest of our values, then we want to be bold and we want to take it. And so, look, we got hit by the pandemic just like everybody in hospitality, far less than the hotel industry, far less than our peers that had least exposure, but we still got hit. Now, in hindsight, it really turned out to be, 1 to 2 months of real impact. The rest of it was more just a dampening on performance. We didn't do as well as we might have done without a pandemic, but we still thrived. We kept our doors open, kept our clients happy, and got through the survival portion of it. But again, back to that value, as quickly as we were, kind of through that the grief process and the survival process, we were immediately looking to what could we do next. And again, part of that was because of our model. Really all we had to do was pay our clients, meet our ongoing obligations, and then move forward. And we were fortunate as well to get some federal relief, just like many other small businesses in the country. So we're grateful for that. And just then, as soon as we could, so really early in the summer, we started looking for ways to get more aggressive, more opportunistic. Again, we were somewhat opportunistic in founding this business. We saw a gap and we worked to fill it. We thought, how could we do that now? And I just happened to read a case study at the right time that was about the 2009 financial crisis done by Bain Consulting. And they did an analysis of various companies from that era. And it went on, to post financial crisis. And their basic analysis was the companies that invested in innovation and growth during that period of time. So it could be tech, could be processes in terms of innovation, could be other, and then growth. So you could be growing your team strategically, you could be growing clients, but generally growth. Those are the companies that succeeded 2 years out, 5 years out, and it was a longitudinal study. So years out, and those that stayed defensive, they may have protected what they had, but ultimately they were left behind. And so we took that approach, invested further in some of our proprietary technology, continued to recruit and hire. It's been an amazing time. I mean, it was still a tiny team, but the talent pools that we're drawing from are just so much better as a result. And, and it's also bearing out in performance, client acquisition, unit acquisition, and then, and then performance for our clients.
Awesome. Were there any key operational changes you guys made during COVID? If so, or if not, if another pandemic happened, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's just been a period of change really since March, and it's come in waves, but of course the standard things, so cleaning protocols had to be increased, then they had to be revisited over time and adjusted, and I think a lot of that will persist after the pandemic. And frankly, I think that's a good thing. It's good for the consumer experience. It's good for trust in the industry, parity with hotels and so forth. Another, I think, fairly standard thing for short-term rental operators was to embrace midterm stays. So those stays of 30 plus days. We didn't do it previously. We've done it since then. And it definitely helps. There's been a shift in consumer behavior, the rise of the digital nomad, but also just, by opening up this supply, all of a sudden we captured demand that was probably always there, and we just weren't attuned to it. And so that's helped us. And again, I think that will persist for us, post-pandemic. And, we're constantly visiting our units and our processes and things, and how can we improve this? How can we make this even more touch-free? How can we communicate something even more effectively? And so it's really it's a weekly and a monthly process for us on all of those things.
I asked this question to Simon earlier, but do you think anything fundamentally has changed about travel, or do you think it's just a matter of time before we're back to 2019 levels?
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure, but I think nothing has fundamentally changed about travel. I think that desire to go experience new places and new cultures, I think that lies within most of us, and I don't think anything's changed about human nature because of this pandemic. There have been other pandemics in recent years in other parts of the world. Maybe they didn't touch us here in the States, but and then if you go back farther, polio, Spanish flu, whatever. The U.S. has certainly felt its impacts. HIV/AIDS crisis in the 80s, right? All of these things have had their impacts, and yet life goes on, and we find a way. So I would say it actually comes more down to it's not about the tech, it's not about the rise of the Zoom meeting. I think it's more economically driven. So there's ironically, I found a study recently out of Wuhan, not about the pandemic, but about basically as income increases, travel consumption increases. So for every 1% of income increase, you get more than a point of travel consumption increase. And so I think that's really the story that's going to underpin what happens post-pandemic is how widespread is the economic destruction as a result of this, and how quickly can economies and companies and then the individual consumers come back. There's nothing on the business front. There's nothing like a face-to-face meeting. This is great. I'm grateful we get to do this sort of thing, and there's been more of this since then, these webinars and things. But maybe these persist, but conventions are needed, and they will come back. It's a highly efficient way to go learn, to go share things, to account manage almost with your clients, to go check in on things and then to add new ones. There's no chance that that's going away. Maybe it starts a little smaller, but it will come back. And yeah, airlines need it. 40%, I think I read, of airline travel is typically corporate travel, and those are the most profitable consumers. So, the airlines will be pushing for it. They'll be incentivizing that, and I'm pretty sure the business professionals that want to get back on the road right now will do so once they feel like it's safe. Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I would add that it's probably not too far in the future where, at least in the rental segment, we're significantly outpacing previous years because of everything you mentioned, but then layering on top of people working from home, and now they can take longer vacations. They don't have to take a week off. They can work from Hilton Head. They can take 2 weeks in. Tim Rizzolio said that their president, Jeff Hurt, took 2 weeks, was working the whole time, but they did a camping tour throughout Yosemite or the Grand Canyon or whatever. I can't remember exactly. But I would tend to agree. A lot of people are writing off business travel for the foreseeable future, but everybody I know that is regularly on the road for business travel is dying to get back on the road. So it's just a matter of when, not yet. Now, have you traveled anywhere? Yeah, I've been on 2 planes in the past month, and I have to say it was a lot smoother and not as crazy as I thought it would have been. So I was talking to some guys from Future Stay yesterday, and they were like, "Yeah, once you kind of break the seal, then you're comfortable with doing it, right? You're back at it." So, well, that was my experience. I took a trip, flight maybe a little over a month ago, 2 months ago almost, and then felt like it was okay. I mostly have done some other drive market trips, but face-to-face meetings I really hadn't done for months. And then I just took a flight. So Delta did a great job blocking off units. Then I took United flight, tiny plane, all jammed in there. So it's just what people say about negative experiences. Here I am talking about it, right? So anyway, choose carefully as you do that. But you wear a mask. Maybe you keep that thing on. You hope that everybody around you does too, and I think it's okay. Yeah, agreed. Now, gearing more towards technology, how do you guys determine what you want to build in-house or what you want to be part of your tech stack, and then how you evaluate partners and what basically the build versus buy dynamic? How do you guys evaluate that? Yeah. Again, like a lot of things for me, I think it kind of goes back to values and how we see ourselves. So we are a tech-enabled multifamily hospitality company. So we just simply couldn't do what we do with the number of people that we have and the number of units that we manage without a lot of technology. And so we are certainly grateful for that. It's integral. It enables us to market, revenue manage, communicate, just manage more effectively. But it's all still a people-centric business is really all I'm working up to. You still have to respond until maybe chatbots are even better, but you still have to have humans dealing with guests and anticipating needs and looking to serve them in great ways. We still need to clean the units. Right now, at least, those are still humans. You need to inspect those cleans, humans. And then you need to interface with clients. You need to interface with other stakeholders like residents and things. So it's a very people-centric business. And so what does that mean to me? It means that, at least in the arc of company building, the most important things for us are the right people, the right clients, and then the right processes. And then picking the right tech at the right time. And for us, that generally means a heavy dose of off-the-shelf technology. So, we only founded this in 2018. If this were 2008, 2010, I think the answers would be different. Maybe there wouldn't be the PMS that's great for urban operators that has the right integrations, or NoiseAware wouldn't exist, and so on and so forth. But instead, we've been able to choose very wisely, I think, carefully, those things that are cost effective on the front end, that then won't require, they'll scale with us, but not in a prohibitive way. So as unit count and things go up, it's all manageable, and where they're well-maintained products and vendors that are ideally well-funded, but at least just well-run, and then we can pick and choose from there. The main thing that we've invested in terms of our own proprietary technology, again, back to a value, the question was, which items can we invest in technology-wise that further us as a leader, that will help us become or reinforce our position as a leader within the space. And so that's been primarily around a proprietary analytics platform, which then feeds in and informs our revenue management strategies and tactics, and we continue to iterate on that. And then connected to that is the client portal. So very client-driven business, built on transparency and trust, and so we can continue to iterate on that. We get feedback from clients, we can build in new features and go and grow from there. But things that are a small portion of the overall operation, and they come in from a well-run team, and they're cost-effective to implement and then to operate. There's no point. There's no rewards for vanity around the fact that tech was built in-house or it came from a third party. In the end, we're delivering a full stack solution to clients, and then delivering financial results, to clients, and then for guests, we're delivering great stays. They don't care what tech underpins that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important thing to bring up, and it looks like Julie Davies would agree with you. It is the hospitality industry, and no matter how leveraged you are with tech, people still have questions. Your mother or grandmother might be traveling and they don't want to use tech. They want to speak with people and have some sort of human interaction. So that's really good to call out. When we started the conversation today, the reason that when you went off to Vector and I came to join NoiseAware, I'd been pitching NoiseAware in our rented pitches for a year, 2 years prior to joining NoiseAware, because I was winning more business, more property owners, more multifamily buildings by talking about how NoiseAware prevents parties and noise neighbor issues, particularly within multifamily, but certainly within single-family owners as well. what's your experience with that? Have you worked NoiseAware into your sales pitch at all for acquiring new units?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys haven't seen it, we've got a video on YouTube. You just pop in like Vector Travel or Vector Travel Multifamily or something, you'll find it. But we have 7 pillars of success around Vector Travel in our service. And so it's a full stack solution, full service. We're revenue management experts. Distribution, channel management. I see Anthony Gant from At Ease. So we're on all the major channels, and then we're looking for new ones like his company. Our former coworker Mateo is there as well, right? We're looking for all kinds of new channels for a while. Maybe we have an edge there till the others get there, no problem, and continue to work on our own distribution and direct as well. Client transparency with the dashboard, guest screening, because I think that's critical in that whole equation, and then noise monitoring, and NoiseAware even gets a call out in that video, and then 24/7 guest and client support. So those are our 7 pillars that they're almost promises to our clients and to our guests and how we do things. So it's critical to prevent them in the first place. So we do guest screening. That's a third-party app. For the most part, we do some stuff manually and kind of our own bespoke processes too. But yeah, prevention is key. But that's with AutoHost. Then it comes down to some of the rules that you may have in place. For example, a small change like going from a 1-night minimum to a 2-night minimum. We've seen that in certain situations really cut down on bad guest stays. What do I mean by that? I just mean anytime a guest violates house rules, and particularly in a way that impacts the unit or those around them, whether they're short-term rental consumers or residents. The COVID party thing, it's been in the media. It's been a real thing. I mean, I don't think we saw the articles after we saw the incidents. But they might pass some of the screening. They may just lie, and they may technically comply. And then once they're in there, then maybe they misbehave in some way. And so we've been able to leverage that bit of technology, the NoiseAware device in the unit, to stay on top of it. So even in a building where you got 12 to 30, 40 units or something, you just can't be in every place at the same time. So even if you're on site, you can't be everywhere at the same time. And so that device lets you know objectively, is somebody violating the house rules around noise? Furthermore, it gives you documentation of it to then use in some kind of a claim against the guest as needed. If you need to remove them, if you don't have some other kind of evidence, it's at least, hey, the decibel level went up to 80 and it stayed there for 20 minutes until we went through our escalation process. But we do have one, and look, we know people are on a work trip, or they're on vacation, or they just have some other need to get away. They may not be trying to do anything bad, and so we do build in a lot of leniency. We reach out just with a message first. Yeah, and then we escalate it to a message and a phone call. We're gathering information as we're doing that. One, are they responding? 2, when we get them on the phone, do we hear things in the background? Is there loud noise going? Are there a lot of other voices, ambient noise? That's going to inform that next step, which is to send somebody over, knock on the door, check on it. It's basically a 3-strike policy, but based on what we see there, they may get to stay, they may get removed. But we have NoiseAware across all of our markets. We'll continue to do that. It's really kind of a critical component. It helps us. It helps us in a lot of ways. And then the other part is that resident stakeholder. So just in case somebody is complaining about something, then we can look at the data and objectively say, hey, you know what? You're right. This person, maybe they didn't meet the threshold, but there was a din of noise that was really not acceptable, and it persisted for a while. And let's take action, whatever it is. Let's mitigate that behavior in some way, or the other way. Maybe the resident's making it up, and they just don't like that activity in their building, and they just need to have the data shown to them, and then they can go away for that reason too. So it's an important part of what we do, and we are grateful for it.
So you mentioned swapping out from no longer taking single night bookings. We pulled some data for Verbo recently when they implemented a one-night ban in Arizona. And we looked at the 2 weeks prior and the 2 weeks following that ban implementation. And there was a 36% reduction in significant noise events in the 2 weeks following. Do you think that's heavily primarily because those single night bookings tend to be your worst guests, or do you think there's anything else to it?
Yeah, look, I mean, we still have one night stays across most of our portfolio. So it's only in certain instances where we don't, and we always had done that. Overwhelming super majority of even one night stays are fine. Yes, it does select, I think, especially during the pandemic, for riskier behavior. And so if you think of it as somebody just looking for the cheapest option, maybe, let's say, the least investment to go and bring the bar to a short-term rental setting, then only having to book one night enables that a little bit. And then the fewer prevention measures that you have in place, less guest screening, all of that could invite that behavior. And so, for us, it's almost never one thing. There's no silver bullets, but, the combination of factors can lead us to just better guest stays. I mean, some other stuff we started doing, we're also just signaling, hey, we want to welcome you to the property, so we do some hospitality check-ins, right? So going ahead and signaling, hey, you're not just gonna to show up, self-check-in, and then be 100% on your own to throw a party. There's a decent chance that somebody may come knock on your door, as if it were a more traditional, hosted Airbnb or something.
Nice. Yeah. We had a question from Will Slickers come in. What's the biggest way to gain more direct bookings? You guys focus a lot on that at this point? Yeah,
well, we've definitely been an OTA first sort of company, and with the belief being most consumers recognize those over individual brands. Furthermore, those marketplaces have the supply options, the breadth and depth of choices. Even in a market that you're in, you're only going to have X number of units, and once you fill those up, the consumers, at a bit of a loss. So the first thing that one company, I think, should do is just make sure that you're properly distributed and then properly optimized, and then work to maintain that. That said, direct bookings are critical. There's a control component. There's a cost component. There's also just sort of a diversification and a risk component around your sources of income. So we don't need to belabor it, but we saw it all. I think everybody on this would have been following the news with Airbnb platform decisions, and they can be somewhat unilateral, and yet they can have real impacts on a professional host business. And so, the more that a company can control its distribution, the better. If you've read Reid Hoffman's Blitzscaling book, it's one of the tenets in there is, any online company needs to basically control its distribution. So, long-winded answer, we have done more remarketing to past guests. We engage the residents in the properties where we manage. We offer them discounts for resident stays, their friends and family, and direct bookings. And during the pandemic, we've also kind of worked on the direct booking side of things. So there's the offline, the B2B, and then it's still light, but it can make a difference even during this time. And then just continue to work on those processes and things. So, yeah, it's important for us. I think it will get increasingly important in the months to come.
Yeah. Can you describe maybe your unit mix and your locations for everybody that's listening?
Sure. So we only manage apartments. Our clients are the businesses. So they're the owners of the buildings, or they're the long-term management companies of those buildings. So on the client side, it's a B2B process, and B2B sales, B2B client relationship. Then, the consumers are going and staying in multifamily businesses. We're in about 25 markets, and, the mix is really kind of anywhere from B minus multifamily assets up to A. It's a mix of tier 1 markets down to tier 3 markets. With our approach, we kind of always recognized there was an opportunity. Back to just the underlying model, we could be a lot more flexible. We didn't only have to go be in the central business district of a market. We didn't only have to be in tier 1 or tier 1 and 2 markets. We had this ability to bring what we had, which was, certain knowledge and certain suite of services and processes and things, and bring value to clients, no matter the market or the asset class. Now, the reason that we generally cut it off at B minus, and that's kind of a soft rule there, and I think the grades can be a little bit subjective, but it's really around like trust and safety, and it could just be a proxy for how well the overall building is managed and maintained. If there are building systems issues, or if there's kind of public safety concerns, then it won't likely go well on the short-term rental operation. So it's not to say a C property would do that. C property that's well run, well located could be a fabulous short-term rental asset, but just as a general rule, that's kind of how we think about it.
So back to parties, are there any specific stories that come to mind, or generally just the volume has increased pretty heavily during COVID?
Well, look, we've used NoiseAware, I think, since the start, or pretty much since the start. So yeah, there are a number of times that come to mind. That, even pre-pandemic, there was a time I got on a train to the airport in Denver and found out, about it was like midday, and somebody was basically throwing a party midday, and got the alerts. The customer service team on my team kind of let me know, and then I could start working with the client a little bit on what was happening, our team on the ground, shutting it down, and so forth. We did see an uptick in that, especially early in the pandemic here. So kind of April, May, and then again we've made moves, all kinds of different moves on screening, on signaling, on visits, on just having a short hook, basically. Like a major league manager during the playoffs, you're going to remove that pitcher any sign of trouble. We're doing
that. He's only given up one hit in the 6th inning.
Oh man, Snell. Jeez. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, so we had some incidents, in a market in Pennsylvania, and that was tough. But again, we knew about it early on and could respond. We actually even seemed to get targeted by a group in that market where they, somebody else then came back and booked, and they were trying to do the same stuff. And then we wised up, if that's a term, and just, kind of screened out all of them, changed a lot of the booking rules, changed the patterns. And that helped us. There was one in Tennessee, guest screening didn't quite capture it, or they worked around it, got quite a few people in a unit. But again, we got the alerts. The noise level went up as the population in the unit went up, and we were able to escalate it quickly, shut it down really before it became much of a problem. Again, it's an issue anytime the unit is overoccupied or anytime the house rules are violated, so we take that seriously. But I just mean before too much goodwill was burned with residents, with the on-site team, and so forth.
Yeah, people can tolerate it to a certain point, and then after that, it's just scorched earth. What are some of the trickle-down costs of a party or of something that you guys, whether you stopped it in the first 5 minutes or it took 30, 45 minutes to put an end to it?
Yeah, well, again, it could be our own decisions, but it could change the way we do things, like a length of stay change, which, that can have an opportunity cost associated with it, missing out on those one-night bookings that you would have otherwise had. So that can cost your client and cost you. It can strain the relationship with your cleaning team, right? If you have too many instances like that in any given market, then their job is harder, right? And they're getting paid the same amount no matter how tidy the room is and how respectful the guest was or how disrespectful it was, unless it triggers sort of a claim issue against a guest, then that would be the exception to that. You could have damages to the unit. So, your furniture, fixtures, equipment, that sort of stuff in there, may need direct replacement, or it may just get more wear and tear than it should have gotten if you're not managing this sort of thing, if you're just letting things happen. And then again, of course, that can tax the relationship with your client, with the residents, with the on-site teams, all of whom are valuable stakeholders, at least for what we do. It can also take a unit offline for a few days. That's obviously costing everybody money. So yeah, I mean, it's it's pretty impactful when one of those does slip through, and the damage is done in lots of different ways, and it takes a while to come back from it.
Yeah. So I've got one or two more questions for you, but while I ask you those, would love any questions from the audience. If you want to start popping those in. So Mickey, when we were at Rented 5 years ago, starting to talk to multifamily buildings, it was pretty much across the board, in fact, no, for the first period of time. And then you go off and start a revenue management company in multifamily, which, had you asked me that 2 years prior, I would have said it's impossible. But today, not only does it seem like the best relationship for the property, but what do you think the future is? Do you think master lease doesn't exist too much longer and it's all going to shift to revenue, or is there always a place for some sort of guaranteed revenue?
Yeah, I think we're still swimming against the stream a little bit. The commercial real estate industry is mostly structured around leases, sort of set payments, lease payments, guarantees around that. And it's not just the owners or the managers. I mean, you really got to think about the entire ecosystem. So lenders, insurance companies, bondholders, so on and so forth. It's all set up around all of that, right? So I agree. When we started this, I mean, I was like, man, this could be huge, or we could just be way early, or just wrong. Frankly, I'm just, I guess, thankfully, somebody who doesn't mind being wrong. I mean, I usually learn something when I'm wrong, and so I tend to embrace those things. And so anyway, we set about doing it. We got fortunate. We landed a client within the first week, and just kind of parlayed that into the next one and the next one, and then hitched our wagons to an institutional client, and then we've been building out from there. But yeah, in terms of the models, I think what we've seen during the pandemic has been some companies have gone under, right, that had the lease arbitrage model. Some have doubled down, right? They've raised more funds, and they're just going to keep going. They're taking that Silicon Valley speed over efficiency mindset. I think that's flawed. It's like the joke from the .com era. It's like, yeah, we got negative unit economics, but we'll make up for it with volume, right? That seems to be what goes on a little bit. You can grow unit count, you can grow revenue, but you're also growing your overhead as you're doing it, and then especially if you're not. I mean, even just winning those deals on the lease side, but then you load in all of the other expenses, and not to mention returns, doesn't seem like a very sustainable model. So the other thing that we've seen during the pandemic are those companies that were doing that. Many of those have kind of pivoted into what we do. So was surprised to see that some of those companies successfully converted leases, with existing ownership or management into revenue share agreements. I don't know the exact framework of those deals, but that's happened a little bit. And I mean, where I think it's probably heading until everybody forgets about all of this and does it all again in 10 to 20 years. But I think a blended sort of approach. I trust there will be some form of a guarantee or some set amount of money, or the operators are taking on different expenses and things. So, I think the only constant will be change, right? So we'll continue to change to the market. We've moved the market maybe a little bit, but now I think it's on us to continue to adapt and make sure we grow versus the competition that's out there coming for us.
Awesome. Julie, on that same topic, Julie wants to know how you structure some of these rev share agreements with buildings. Are costs negotiable, whether it's furniture paid for by property or rented or you guys, or are there lists of services that you can tack on to raise your fees, or what does that typically look like?
Yeah.
Proprietary.
Yeah, I'm looking at her specific question now. Yeah, we basically have two versions of our agreement. We have a limited service deal, and then we have the full service deal. So limited service applies if it's a rare instance, but if they just so happen to have kind of on the ground personnel for housekeeping and hospitality purposes, then we can just do kind of everything online. So revenue management, channel management, guest communications, the accounting and maybe the compliance work as well. And then kind of the blocking and tackling on the ground gets handled by the client. That's a lower fee, as you can imagine, but it's still a percentage of revenue. And still with that, we're kind of covering our software, our personnel. It's pretty well siloed, I guess I should say. Then in the full service arrangement, it's a higher fee to us, but we're also doing all of those services that I mentioned. And our goal is really such that the on-site teams, our clients, and then their representatives on the ground, they don't have to do much. So basically, most of the time they have maintenance teams on site. That's really the only thing we rely on them for. There are some expenses they're sharing in, but generally, they've got the most valuable component, the actual real estate, and then we just come in and we activate those spaces. But things around furniture can be and rate and all that. There's a deal to be had there. You can structure it in different ways, but the default is anything that's going to stay with the real estate. That's going to be their expense, the service and the personnel and all the software and then just the responsibility around all of that and making it happen and hitting numbers and getting guests in and out and giving great stays, but also removing the bad ones. All of that sort of work comes to us.
He likes the flexibility. I think flexibility, Stuart and I were talking about this the other day. The flexibility is the key word of 2020. Whether you're a short-term rental company like Vector, who moved more midterm, to get through a couple months there. You're a hotel like Marriott is now offering rooms during the day to work out of. Mm-hmm. I think the ability to flex your inventory and even like short-term or traditional long-term rental buildings, being able to have their tenants offer short-term rentals through it, like the ability to flex real estate is something that's fairly new. And I think is, if I were to give an overarching theme of 2020 for broad hospitality and real estate, it would certainly be flexibility.
They're just boxes, right, that throw off cash. And you could do that in myriad ways, ways that people haven't even thought of yet, perhaps, or that at least aren't commercialized. But short-term stays, what an apartment could probably get used like a temporary office. It can be a midterm stay. It can be a long-term rental. It can be, you could aggregate the units and do something else cool with them. It could become part of an event space, whatever, right? And that's just off the top of my head. So I think that's true. And yet again, the current way of doing things, the covenants, maybe from insurance, maybe from lenders, and then just, hey, that's not how we do things here. That's not how we've done it in the past. I think some companies are set in their ways, or some are just structurally restricted based on those stakeholders. But others have been, more adaptive, have been, visionaries around this, and have embraced that change. And I think, yes, maybe they've had some scuffles with maybe corporate lease defaults from the lease arb operators, but they've also picked themselves right back up. And whether they took those units in-house, whether they leased them as furnished rentals, or they partnered with Vector, a company like us, on a revenue share basis, I think they're probably more resilient than their counterparts.
Last question that I've got for you. If I'm a multifamily building, why would I want to hire Vector? How different is running short-term rentals than their traditional long-term rentals?
Is the question, they want to do short-term rentals and then they're trying to decide whether to do it themselves?
Yeah.
It's very different. It's one of the things I'm fond of saying is basically any multifamily company could run their own short-term rental program, but almost none of them should. And what I mean by that is they're really good at doing what they do. So it's hard to talk, in broad strokes, given that there's different types of players out there. But if they're a multifamily ownership group, they're good at whatever they do, developing or value add acquisitions and renovations, and then either it's in-house or they partner with a third-party manager and they lease them up on a long-term basis. Anyway, all of that is different than this. Even the online channels, right? So maybe they do 30-plus day stays, and now we do 30-plus day stays. But they're doing those through their traditional ILSs, apartments.com and the like. And we're doing it through Airbnb and booking.com and our direct booking site and so on and so forth, right? So the distribution is different. The tech stacks are different. The processes are different in a hospitality, operation. The timelines are different. I mean, we got to get things done like this, or you're losing the guest. You either got to fix their problem immediately or almost immediately, or you got to cut them loose and find them a new place to stay, or move them to another of your units or to a hotel down the street or whatever it may be. And then just the values and the personnel that are interfacing. Hospitality is learned, in my opinion. Maybe some people are more predisposed to it, but I consider myself a hospitality person now, but I don't think I was when I started the business. Again, I saw an opportunity. I kind of knew the space, but I didn't know this specific stuff. I'm consistently learning new things, whether it's from folks who have come before. We just as a team, we just read the Ritz-Carlton book, Excellence Wins, and we're implementing a lot of those things in here. No, we don't just focus on luxury stays. No, we're not going to empower our guest services team to spend $2,000 on every single guest, but we can borrow from that in some way that makes sense, for our inventory. So yeah, I think it's very different.
It's not a 9 to 5, right?
Yeah.
They're come in at 9 and they're gone by 5. And
here's the last point I'll make on it. Like this is what we do. So we have an incremental improvement mindset, and I'm sure many other companies that do hospitality do as well. So we'll continue to get better at that. And then if a multifamily company desires to self-manage this stuff, again, they can do it, but they also have all of those other responsibilities. So over time, the gap is going to continue to widen. We'll get better and better. The alpha of our operation will improve, and they'll be left behind. So I think ultimately they'll be looking to partner with somebody like us at some point in the future. So might as well do it now.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's hang on for 1 or 2 more minutes and see if any more questions come through. But in the meantime, since the World Series just ended yesterday, for all those listening, Mickey used to play in the Tigers organization and caught Justin Verlander back in spring training.
Yeah, that's right. I guess he just had Tommy John surgery. I had that in high school, so wish him a speedy recovery. But that seems like a lifetime ago at this point, probably 40 pounds ago as well. But anyway, yeah, man, it's a good experience.
Nice. Cool. Well, I don't see any more questions coming through, so appreciate everybody joining us today. Thanks we got Julia in at the buzzer. What's your take on municipalities limiting the number of units for STR within a multi-unit structure?
Yeah. I wonder which market she's thinking of specifically, but yeah, I mean, we've seen that in certain markets. I'm trying to think, Austin and Nashville, I guess, with kind of a cap unless a building is rezoned. Stuart says Chicago, yeah, so we operate there, and there's only 6 units, I think, per building if they have multiple buildings, or unless you rezone the property. Las Vegas, I don't even know. We've looked at Vegas a few times, and each building we've looked at had prohibitive regulations, and we've pieced together different individuals from the space. So there was somebody from Stay Alfred previously that worked on those rezonings. We kind of have them at the ready. Check in with them again, but should one of those opportunities present itself. But we haven't worked on Vegas. But yeah, we see that. Look, I actually think it's fine. I think our function primarily is when units can't get rented, at least at the rates that ownership or management has budgeted for, then they can bring us in, and then secondarily they can kind of diversify their income streams, and then maybe lastly they can turn some units into basically an amenity that pays for itself. So it can actually be something for the residents and for the on-site teams and all of that. So I think just like almost any regulation, I think if it's done in kind of a balanced way, it's not just reacting to certain incidents or the loudest voices in the room, then I think that can be fine. In the end, the multifamily properties are ultimately kind of an affordability measure most of the time, unless they're specifically high-end luxury assets. So I'm okay with some limitation. It just has to be balanced. It has to be fair. And you have to respect property rights as well, those people to be able to do something with their vacant assets.
Yep. Another question, Lauren Miller. What advice would you give someone who's breaking into co-hosting or property management? What's the best way that you found to find new clients, new customers, or not new customers, new properties to manage?
What's co-hosting? Is that like the
property management, managing other properties for them?
But does the owner also host? I guess I'm asking the question just to clarify. We wouldn't do a blended approach. I mean, it's kind of all or nothing for us. We have exclusive rights over units that we interact with. So I wouldn't feel qualified to speak about co-hosting specifically. But my guess is, the blended approach is what Lauren's getting at. My guess is that's going to be more local than what we've traditionally done. Our stuff has been more industry driven. So around, the apartment industry in terms of networking. So back when there were events and things, and then just B2B outreach and networks and then building a team that has an existing network and integrating that. And then, was building a following over time and outreach. I would guess, basically local Airbnb host forums, fora, could be good if you live in a market that's sort of like, Raleigh, Durham, right? You've got Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill to pull from, and and that example could exist in a lot of different places. You could hustle up those. I'm sure right now there's probably still some meetings that are virtual. You could do that sort of thing. There's probably the opportunity to go ahead and list your service on some kind of a marketplace. Michael and I spoke earlier this week, so maybe even if it's just like a Thumbtack or similar, I think there's a chance there. There's something we used in the past too, Lauren. It was called, with the last business, allpropertymanagement.com, I think it was. It was just a lead gen service, and you can list there. You pay per lead, but it's not that much. And I think the lifetime value of you adding a co-hosted client is going to be pretty high relative to what you'd spend on that. And so there's that. And then of course there's all the traditional stuff, right? Throw up a landing page, throw up a Facebook account around it. Try to push out some ads so you can do some SEM, some SEO, all of that. But my guess is that the way that you're going to move the needle the fastest and the most effectively is through humans and human interaction and building some trust and making it happen there.
Cool. And possibly the last question we'll have time to get to from Daniel Cruz. Are you trying to replicate hotel style amenities and best practices around your units? or are you differentiating or experimenting in new ways?
Yeah, Daniel. I mean, the in-unit guest experience, so including housekeeping and then the supplies they interact with and all those sorts of things. I mean, it's I think it's the hardest part of what we do, at least being in a lot of different markets and, kind of the core management being remote and then distributed housekeeping and housekeeping oversight and local guest experiences. So I think it's the thing that we iterate on maybe the most and probably still have the most work to do on, despite the work. But, we borrow from the hotel industry. One thing that comes to mind recently, so we'd always used makeup towels. Not always, actually. At one point, we didn't use makeup towels, and so people would wipe their makeup on a white washcloth. Well, that ruins the washcloth, even if you bleach it. Apparently it's done. So then we went to black washcloths. Well, recently I stayed in a very nice hotel and they had the disposable makeup remover, and so we just decided to try it out, not just because of the potential guest experience of that, one and done, you use it, it's sanitary and so forth, there's no stains on it, but also from an operational perspective, we could now bleach everything, so they're all white, so you can just bleach everything, you don't have to do a special load. So back to this being a process business and a human-driven business, those are the sorts of things we're working on all the time, right? And it's over time, that's what helps build a little bit of a moat around it. So yeah, it's a blend. We also go stay in competitor units, and we learn a lot. We've stayed in Sonder units, we stayed in some of the other multifamily short-term rental operator units, and they do a lot of things well. Other times it's good to see, oh, look, they struggle with some of these things too. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up. We should just take action and work to improve them.
Awesome. Well, Mickey, appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Michael.
NoiseAware has a virtual booth where one of our sales reps that Mickey and I also used to work with, Stuart White, running that. If you have any questions for him, pop in there. The next panel is going to be StayFi and Rylan Nelson with him. So appreciate the conversation today, Mickey. Enjoyed it and hope everybody got something from it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again soon. I'll deliver these in person. All right.
Can't wait. Let's do it.
See you, Michael. Thanks, man.